Joining me from Southern California is Dr. Jason Park. Once again, Jason, thank you so much for the time ahead of this massive fight at UFC 260. Incredible situation for you and your team. How you feeling?
We're all super excited. This is what we all live for, and we're super excited to take it to the next level. So this is a very exciting moment for us.
I wanted to go back first before we talk about the title fight in last October, UFC Fight
Yes.
Island. Brian Ortega made his long-awaited return to the octagon with a lot of questions to answer, and he answered them with flying colors. When you're sitting there watching Ortega put on that master class against the Korean Zombie in the corner, what was running through your mind?
Obviously we're very proud of him. The whole team is very proud of what Brian put out there. And I think that echoes both with the whole team that was out there, with myself, the Chuy Avila, Coach Paul Herrera, Tiki Gozin, and also with the team that we have back home in LA. We called Henry Gracie right away because he couldn't join us on the trip because he had a positive test, because we wanted to share in the moment, and it was such a stunning moment because Dawn was just coming over in Abu Dhabi. We were fighting, I think, 5 a.m. And so when we finished media, it was around 6 a.m., 6:30. So the dawn is just coming over, and we were sharing the moment with both the team there and also back home. It was beautiful. And during the fight, I think we can all remember that we had a really great plan. We had him really trained up with some great new skills. But again, it's the talent and the creativity of Brian Ortega that took all the things that we had there, and he took it to another level. And I think not just this fight, but all the fights that he's had in the past, I've heard, past coaches, current coaches say the same thing. We came in with something, and then Brian knows how to take it to a very different level.
Yeah, the creativity has always been there, and then you saw that with the added components, and it turned out to be an incredible performance. Now, when you look back and dissect his performance, how much of what you trained and worked on came out in the fight?
I think there was quite a lot. We had a very specific game plan for Zombie, to utilize strikes, to utilize wrestling, to disrupt Zombie's timing. But again, what was so stunning about that fight is, you expect fighters to be able to do things in bits and pieces. But what Brian did, he put together everything in a perfect orchestral performance for 5 full rounds. So that's the rare thing, is to be able to go for 25 minutes and not miss a beat. That's something special. And that's something that we hope for. We always say as coaches, but to see someone be able to put that out on a perfect performance, we're obviously very proud, and the credit goes to Brian.
How much credit could you put towards the bald head, the new look?
I think one thing that Brian likes to be is the underdog. So, having that, he's already coming in after 2 years of not having seen the cage. So he was like, well, why not give them something more? Give them something more to talk about. And, that kind of fueled him into making him feel even more like the world was not with him and that he could prove them wrong. And I think he did that.
There was a lot of talk, he had complication in his weight cut. That's why he cut his hair. When you guys were in the back, in the hotel room, and you're hearing these things come through, what was going through the team?
With one of the things that kind of struck me was, the whole week Brian kept asking me hey, what month is this? Is this a month for cancer awareness? And he kept asking me this question, and I, almost like a negligent coach, I didn't follow up on it. I was like, I'm not sure. And all it would have taken me was to Google it. But for me, I didn't Google it. I had no idea why he was asking. And then, now looking back at it, he had been thinking about this since Monday, Tuesday. He was like, it's going back to a weight cut. He wanted to give a new look. And obviously, as he said in his post interviews, he felt for these children who were going through cancer and were losing their hair due to their treatments. So obviously, as these things, the stresses of starting the weight cut, and then his generosity, his ability to connect with people that he goes out and sees, his fans, they collided, and I didn't even pick it up because this is our first ride together for the first 2 fight camps with Korean Zombie. So, that was my first time with him during a weight cut, and I didn't expect him to actually have a serious question behind it. So even for me, I had to learn something new about Brian Ortega in that moment, that he's always thinking about the bigger picture. And that speaks to his character too.
When you watch the media, like when you watch his interviews ahead of the fight, during fight week, he was very loose. He was laughing and he wasn't like taking the questions too seriously, and that showed something about him coming to that fight, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think there are just so many things. Like the Lakers just were going on for their playoff win. We brought a championship home to Los Angeles. That means something big to us people from LA, to see a championship come back in the year that Kobe passed away. And I think that, Brian comes from the same area of Los Angeles in the South Bay as I did. So we all look up to Kobe so much, and the Laker brand is huge to us. So, even though he was wearing a Nike jersey, he was persistent that he wanted to wear that 824 Black Mamba jersey all week long to celebrate Kobe and to celebrate that win. So I think he brought that energy. I mean, he literally wore that when we got to the airport all the way to Abu Dhabi. He wore it all through that week. So you could tell like he was bringing that Mamba mentality with him.
After the victory over the Zombie, was the team immediately focused on the title fight with Volkanovski?
I think we always will have like pre-plans in our fight camps, right? Like that. We're always thinking of the opponents that are coming ahead, not to look past the opponent that we have coming right in front of us. We're always planning for what are, especially in COVID times, like you never know what opponents might have to switch out. So we're always planning for who we might have to face, right? So we've already had a lot of time to just, consider what Volkanovski would be like for us. So we didn't have to rush right into like a very specific camp. We just wanted to develop him, make sure Brian's getting stronger, his condition is staying up, building on his fundamental skills. And then as the time came closer to fight camp, then we kind of shifted to something more specific.
When did you guys get the green light to start the training camp for UFC 260?
I mean, we're always, we kind of take a different thought process, and like, we always want to keep our athletes mentally stimulated. We want to make sure that they're always developing because, the time outside of fight camp is really where you develop. That's where you get better. And a fight camp is just to make sure that you're getting up to peak condition, your weight's coming down, everything's just, just literally peaking for that competition. So, we don't really stress out too much when the green light came. It's like, okay, well, we're already training. We're just going to continue riding this storm and just taking it up a little bit each week, taking it up a notch.
Now, Volkanovski, he has 9 fights in the UFC, and of course, he's a phenomenal fighter. He holds the title. He's the champion, and he has evolved in front of our eyes, just as Brian Ortega has. When you dissect his run, how impressive have you been by his versatility?
I mean, the UFC is no picnic, right? So anyone who went on like a long run like Volkanovski did, Holloway did, it means that they're formidable. They have talent mixed with grit, mixed with hard work and dedication. So, there's no easy fights in the UFC, especially as you get to the top 5, there's especially no easy fights. So obviously we respect him. We know he comes from very high caliber. He trains with the best. He's constantly working. I know he's a hard worker himself. very humble, always looking to better himself. So, we're definitely not overlooking him. We're ready for the challenge.
When you look at both guys, they're if you dissect their style, they started off as guys that like to go to the ground, in different ways. Brian is more of a submission fighter. Volkanovski's more of a ground and pound guy. And then they developed this stand-up game. Isn't it just incredible, like, how this fight could be one of those fights where it's like true mixed martial artists, both of them. You got guys that could finish anywhere at any time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just the evolution of the sport. I mean, obviously it speaks to the caliber of these athletes, but I mean, anywhere from ranked 1 to 15, you see everyone is complete now. They can finish fights like standing, on the ground, takedowns. You have to be comfortable everywhere. So I think when you watch Volkanovski, when you watch Brian Ortega, you watch Max Holloway, they're all, elevating the game as we speak. You can just watch fights from 5 years ago, and you can see like the caliber is changing, not necessarily in terms of how excellent they are, but just how diverse their skill sets are. I think it's just a necessity to have to evolve in this sport.
Volkanovski, he's been labeled because of the Max Holloway fights, labeled as like a point fighter, not really going for it. But do you feel like that's just because he fought Max Holloway and that was just the game plan, and if he fought somebody else, it would be a different story?
I mean, I don't think Volkanovski is necessarily a point fighter. I think he definitely goes for the decisive finishes. He's trying everything he has to finish things decisively. And I think you can look back into his record, and it's not that he always goes to the decision, So I think that's unfair to say that he's a point fighter. But what I will say is that he's definitely an intelligent fighter that finds creative ways to win. So if things aren't going his way, you can't count him out to just beat a dead horse. He's going to find a new way to solve the puzzle. And that's something that made him a champion. And you got to give credit to Volkanovski for being creative and sticking to a game plan when things aren't going his way.
Volkanovski has beaten Holloway twice. I'm sure you've watched those fights extensively. Do you think the judges got it right on both occasions?
I think at the end of the day, you can't trust judges, right? Like, I think this is something that I've heard growing up in boxing and Muay Thai. Like, you just can't trust the judges. When you get to a decision, if it goes the wrong way, you can complain about it, but, part of it lies in, like, that decision. It comes because of your performance, right? Fairly or unfairly. So when you get there, like, both of those fights were so close. I think the first one was a little bit more decisive just because, Max just was not as reactive to Volkanovski's initial plan to attack the legs. But the second fight was very, very close. And I think you can never guess that they have a 10-8 round, no matter how much you might hurt someone. And so, yeah, Max, definitely hurt Alex in the first and second round, right? But at the end of the day, you can only count that it's a 2-2 fight going into the fifth round, right? And I think that's a pretty good approach to handling those situations. And we've seen that multiple times in the UFC, especially in the last year. Like, fifth round is like where it's decisive. And you can't take it easy on any of those rounds.
A talking point heading into this title fight would be Ortega. He fought Holloway, got finished. Holloway lost to Volkanovski twice. The MMA math is going to be, being calculated ahead of this fight. Does it make sense sometimes, do you think, or is it just moronic that people use this?
MMA math, it's just the easiest way to kind of approach a problem, right? It seems correct, but you're not really paying attention to how styles make fights. And even within this, where you talk about, like, okay, it's striking versus striking, and maybe this fight will go ground or striking, you don't know. But especially what they're grading on is striking all across the boards, but striking's different for each fighter, you know. So even their styles make fights. In boxing, we see this all the time. Like they're all striking athletes, but they only have two fists, but styles make fights. Different people will beat other people.
To game plan against one of the best teams in the sport, how does that impact you as a coach?
You know, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I gotten from an older mentor of mine is, you know, at the end of the day, everyone's human, right? So we just have to take each fight step by step, you know, go through it logically. And, you know, this is the same thing we tell Brian, you know, this is a big fight for you, but you don't want to go into it thinking this is the biggest fight of your life. It's just another day, another opponent. He's going to be there in the cage, locked in with you. So all the stuff that we think about outside of that arena, at the end of the day, it's just four people and four people in the corner, one person in the cage, one person in the cage. All the opinions of the world before the fight, after the fight, they don't exist in that moment. Like, that's what being present is. So, you know, every step of the way, we have to stay present and not let the circumstances overwhelm us and just take it step by step like any other fight.
I've seen Brian over the past couple months training in a garage, training at a few gyms. Who are some of his closest training partners that he's been working with?
Well, I mean, we've definitely had like an array of amazing training partners. You know, he's been training over at the Gracie University with Hannah Gracie, as well over at Huntington Beach Ultimate Training Center with his manager Tiki Gosen, as well as Paul Herrera. You know, so, you know, in those situations, we have so many great fighters that we've been blessed to work with as they've been coming through, you know, and it's really just it's been amazing to watch Brian continue to evolve with every kind of opponent that we put in front of them to, you know, kind of challenge them, you know. And what's great is to see even someone like Cub Swanson, who was once an opponent of Brian's, to come in to help, and he's been a huge asset in training for this fight and the last fight with Korean Zombie as well.
Ortega goes in there, he defeats Volkanovski, he becomes the UFC champion. What else does the team prove with the victory over a guy that has never lost at featherweight?
Yeah. You know, I think, again, it goes back to, you know, whether he's undefeated at featherweight, you know, he's a champion. Like, you know, Alex is a great fighter. And great fighters meeting each other make great fights. And that's what fans want to see. So I think at the end of the day, you know, yeah, would, you know, the fact that he hasn't lost in such a long time, you know, that he beat Max twice, but those are just, you know, facts of the past, right? We give full credit to him. He did an amazing job in the UFC, but, you know, all those things are just parts of our past in our resume. You know, we're here in the present now.
How do you see the fight playing out? Do you see Ortega being able to get a knockout or even submit Volkanovski?
You know, I think, you know, just watching Brian, like, he has so many skills that he's assembled, you know. You know, again, through his UFC run, he didn't have an easy UFC run either. You know, I think in that way, both Volkanovski and Brian share that, in that they had a fast rise through the featherweight rankings. They were able to do really amazing performances against, you know, fighters that are coming up, as well as fighters that were, you know, at their peak and, you know, highly ranked. And they were able to do it in great style. So I think, you know, he's learned a lot in his UFC career, and all we're doing is just tweaking, growing, building on his fundamentals. You know, this fight can go anywhere, especially with these two, you know, because Volkanovski, like you said, he evolved his striking game over the years. Same thing with Brian. They both are good grapplers, good wrestlers, good jiu-jitsu athletes. So, I think this can go anywhere over the course of those 25 minutes, and it's going to be really exciting to see.
You were not part of the camps, ahead of actually part of the camp ahead of Max Holloway fight, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Now you are working with him extensively. Brian Ortega becomes a champ. The Holloway rematch. Does that make sense?
I mean, of course, I think that's a fight that everyone wants to see, right? And again, we have to do something decisive to make that fight happen. So obviously we know that that's coming in the future if we come out with the win for this fight. I know Brian definitely wants the challenge. He's excited for it. So, but at the end of the day, we're not thinking about that right now because, well, we have a real challenge ahead of us come March 27th. So that's where our focus is right now.
Vegas, there's a small cage. The last time you guys competed was in the big cage on Fight Island. Is there a massive difference? Is there something about that we don't, as fans, as people outside of the sport, don't understand?
I think the size of the cage does matter, right? Especially how people move around and how to cut off the ring. But, at the end of the day, these athletes who, especially at the top, they're well conditioned. So the size of the ring plays, a small margin of a strategy change. I think the biggest thing is once you have a smaller cage, everyone can hear each other better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for
especially
sure.
now with no crowds, right? So we could all hear each other in Abu Dhabi. I can imagine, or actually, I know from the times I've been in Vegas for the UFC, like you just hear everyone from announcers to other cornermen just that much easier. So.
Take a move in the ring. You can hit me with a word you fling.